Hi there. You're listening to the Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome back to the podcast. This week I am reading the rather short Chapter 3, Something Must Change, and also Chapter 4, Life at Court. Now let's get started. The following afternoon I pulled Gabrielle aside. She had left us high and dry, and I wanted to know more. She had defended Thomas in the past, but I was determined to finally make her see who he truly was, a dangerous thorn hiding on the stem of a stunning rose. He will not last, I told her. We were in the lost forest, the summer sun high in the afternoon sky and beating down on us. It was practically hot, and the trees were giving us great shade. Thomas is a fool as much as the other Rosewood boys. If they aren't strong and tyrannical, then they are timid and silly. You lack understanding, Gabrielle was concise, her voice calm. Thomas is so unlike the others that he will excel at being king. I think we should get rid of him. Just like the nobility says, I remarked, crossing my arms. Thomas is a beacon of light in a once darkened place, Gabrielle said, staring at me. How could you think to rebel against him? If we do not overthrow him, he will become like his brothers, I argued. I will be darned if I have to live in the meadow any more with a king like that. How do you know these things? She shot back. The Rosewood boys have a terrible track record, I hissed. Am I to believe that now, randomly, when Thomas arrives, that he will not be like the others? He has already shown how timid and shy he is. I do not trust him. It could be a guise to lure us into a false understanding. He has been sheltered up at King's Summit. He has been learning their ways. He is smart, calculative. He is just using this as an opportunity to hide his true self. He must wait until power is his. Gabrielle shook her head and turned away from me. I will not believe it. I know Thomas, and he is not like that at all. You are lumping him together with his brothers. You are making him guilty by association. Mark my words, Gabrielle. I stared at her fiercely. I was certain she could feel my rage. You will come to regret your decision today. I thought that you, as heiress of the forest, would understand the need for a new king. We cannot keep having these Rosewood imbeciles rule over us like cats and mice. The time for change is imminent, and I will not stand by as they continue to run this meadow into the ground. I did not allow Gabrielle to answer. I was too infuriated by her stupidity. She had been blinded by the Rosewood light, as so many before her had been too. He was certainly a beacon of light. He was blinding everyone to his true, malicious, hidden nature. I stalked away into the trees, wanting to be absorbed by them. Gabrielle let me go. She said nothing as I stalked off angrily. I had to find Alex. Alex would certainly understand. I found her playing near the swing set with a few other children. When she saw me, she immediately ran over to where I was standing idle. I leaned against a tree. I just spoke with Gabrielle, I said, mentally exhausted. What happened? She asked. You look very flustered. She will not back us up, I said. I want to go to the Duke and tell him that Thomas is not what he seems. I want to overthrow these clowns. How can we do that now if we do not have the support of our future Duchess? So, Gabrielle believes that Thomas is some beacon of light. Literally, I huffed. I cannot sit idly by while they continue to ruin this meadow. Something must be done. Then an idea hit me. The proverbial light bulb lit up in my brain. I looked over at Alexandra, who stared blankly at me. She could tell I had a dastardly idea. You will marry Thomas. What? She shrieked. Her entire face became mortified. Are you joking? Please tell me you are joking. I laughed deeply. No, not at all. This is perfect. I will help. What do you exactly have planned? How will this help overthrowing Thomas? I then began my grand scheme, my grand plan. First and foremost, this will allow us to get close to the king. Then, when you become the queen, I will be your attendant. We will learn the ins and outs of the royal system and plot their downfall from the inside out. Then, when all is said and done, the monarchy will fall, and one of us will rise and become the new queen. Alex nodded. She had calmed herself when she realized how ingenious my plot was. This is a perfect plan, but how are we going to go about it? As a new and single king, Thomas will be swamped with formal offers of marriage. I am just a commoner, a forest tenant. How will that work? That part will require a bit more thinking, I admitted, rubbing my chin. I ran my hands through my blonde hair. I think we might have to reinvent you. Reinvent? Yes, I smiled at her, the malicious idea growing in my mind to bulbous proportions. That is the glory about this game. Anything can happen. Why don't we tell the Duke that you've just found out that you're of royal ancestry? That will allow us to gain ground, and then you will become part of the inner circle. That's a lot of lying, Alex said maniacally. She paused and a grin grew on her lips. I'm totally in. Then let the games begin, I smirked. The train to Dranmore is leaving the station. Do you have your copy yet? Find my newest novel, The Train to Dranmore, exclusively on Amazon. That concludes Chapter 3, Something Must Change. Up next, Chapter 4, Life at Court. We spent the next month finalizing our plans. Thomas was crowned the first weekend in July to great success. Titan made off like a bandit in the night and he was never seen again. Just as quickly as Titan departed, so did the memories of his reign. The children wanted to forget, and many were excited about the prospect of a new king. They did not know, however, what I knew. They saw Thomas and thought of him as a fresh breath of air into an old institution. Soon, I knew, they would be made to understand that this was not the case. I made up some story on the spot that Alex was a descendant of elven royalty and had been displaced in the Lost Forest following the elven extermination by King Nathaniel. This would cover the fact that there was no proof to authenticate Alex's wild claims. Paperwork often gets lost during messy times. While Castor and Matilda were skeptical at first, their quick conversing led them to believe Alex's tall tale. They had more elves in the forest now. How could they refuse or deny her? This was a cause for great celebration amongst the Lost Forest denizens, as many had believed that elves were made extinct long ago. Gabrielle was the only one who remained a little skeptical, but she did not matter to our plans at that point. She was allowed to feel how she wanted. Once that was completed, Castor made her a lady and permitted her to attend court at King's Summit. I left Castor's service and volunteered to become Alex's royal attendant. We were now well on our way to entering the king's inner circle. Alex's untruth was complete, and I would play the part of her doting servant. All was not well, however, at King's Summit. There had been talk of rebellion all June, before the coronation had even taken place. A rumor had spread, quite maliciously in fact, and a few commoners were calling it the June Revolution. Many of the uptight nobles did not care for Thomas's lax style of rule. They thought he was too soft. Unfortunately, no unsettling of the throne came in June, and Thomas could breathe easy, for the moment. Alex and I had been lounging at King's Summit for some time, and had become acquainted with various nobles. This was likely over the course of all of June and much of early July. We fit right in with little effort. Many were quite interested to learn that a forest dweller was now a lady, and that she had some curious blood. A spoiled aristocrat named Lady Diamond and Alex seemed to get along well enough, but I could not stand her attendant. Lady Diamond, whose real name was Clarissa Diamond, reminded me of Princess Peach. She was pretty and luxurious, but a complete dullard. She had overflowing long blonde hair that fell in ripples and curls, matched with her large sky-blue eyes. Many referred to her as a porcelain doll, for she had a fair appearance but lacked a true personality. She often wore extremely frilly gowns and over-the-top outfits to the meadow. One might suggest she would look better on a shelf or in a collector's box. One gorgeous summery afternoon we were all seated under a large oak tree that overlooked the meadow. From here we could see down the hill and into the royal city. Lady Diamond's attendant, a very small girl named Olivia, was pouring us iced tea. She carried it over in Dixie cups and on a small tray. The idea of Thomas being married was brought up again, Lady Diamond said randomly. This has been talked about for ages, Lady Alex added. Now that she was a lady, she wore her black hair in a singular tight cable, or often left it flowing down her back. She also put on lip gloss and occasionally a bit of eyeshadow. When will we marry? Between you and me, there really isn't anyone who wants to marry him, Diamond snickered. Oh? Alex feigned alarm. What makes you say that? I do enjoy Thomas. He is such a thoughtful person, so unlike his brothers. Yes, but he lacks focus. Did you not hear about the June Revolution? Her manner of speaking was garish and a bit over the top. I thought that was all just talk, Alex said smugly. He is hopelessly boring. Did you hear? He wants to reinstate some aristocracy tax, Clarissa added. At least Titan ruled with an iron fist, and we were all happy, living the good life. I miss fancy chocolates. Thomas lacks, well, everything. He isn't fun anymore. You dodged my prior question, Alex said, sipping at her tea. Lady Diamond blinked randomly. Oh yes, my mistake. No noble woman would think to marry such a boring king. Diana got a kick out of being queen when married to Titan. He was thrilling to be around. Perhaps you should put your hat into the ring, my lady, I inserted. Lady Alex is so fond of His Majesty. Perhaps he will marry her. Alex smiled. What a nice idea. I wonder what it would take for me to be considered. I do not think you are serious, Lady Diamond remarked plainly, but I suppose it is worth a chat with Kratos. It would also not hurt to actually hang out with Thomas. Splendid, Alex said. She turned to me with a wry smile. Would you go and set that up? Of course, my lady. I curtsied as best as I could. The plan was working. When I strolled through King's Summit, the place seemed an empty shell. The thrones sat empty, and the spot under the tree fort was bare. A light breeze was moving the leaves in the trees, creating some sound. I looked around, searching for Lord Kratos. My eyes met with Heather's figure, who was leaning against a tree for shade. Afternoon, I said to her. Where is the Lord Chancellor? Out with His Majesty, Heather replied, blinking. She also spoke with a mechanical tone. I will make note of your request to see him. Sure, I said, sort of creeped out by her attitude. Are you enjoying your time here? She asked as I went to walk away. Do you mean at King's Summit? She nodded. Yes, I suppose so. It was quite the whirlwind to find out that my friend Alex had royal blood. Now she is a lady and allowed to hang out here. It is an interesting experience. Heather stared at me in a way that could only be described as robotically. She held her hands at center. I am glad of that. It was hard for me at first, but since I am part of the gentry, I am treated better than the commoners. Why do you talk like that? I asked her, quite haphazardly. I was intrigued as she appeared to be a cyborg, or perhaps that was just the way Heather was as a person. I am a computer-programmed assistant android, or CPAA for short, she answered quickly. I was designed by Kratos, the Lord Chancellor, to be the perfect assistant. I nodded and blinked. Nothing was coming to mind. Don't worry, I'm not really a robot, Heather smirked, breaking character. She gave me a friendly wink. Just in the game, silly. I laughed then. Of course. Sometimes I forget how serious we are. I am considered a trial run, Heather said, returning to her robotic tone. If my program is successful, there is a chance that all human royal attendants will be replaced with androids such as myself. I wouldn't want that, I answered. As cool as that sounds, I think many of the nobles appreciate a human touch. Not to be insulting to you, Heather. I completely understand, she said. My primary function appears to be the sorting and processing of documents for Kratos, the Lord Chancellor. I know some facts, but my database has not been properly uploaded to capacity yet. I do not offer much else. Well, I hope your trial is successful for Kratos. If he likes you, he might just let you stick around. I am certain that I will remain in his employ, Heather said. Her tone seemed to suggest that she knew her own future. I smiled back at her and stalked away. Perhaps Heather would come in handy later. As a robot, I assume she stored a lot of data in her memory. Conceivably, we could make that work in our favor. I returned to find Alex alone. She was pacing mercilessly. Lady Diamond and her waif of a servant had left. Did you secure the meeting? Alex seemed impatient. Kratos wasn't around, but I made an ally out of Heather, I think. She's an android, you know. Believe me, I know, she sighed, sitting down on the grass. Kratos considers her a wonder. There was a moment of abrupt silence. Birds chirped in the distance as Alex exhaled heavily. This is going really well, Alex said, turning to grin at me. We are both becoming closer and closer to our goal. Now we must get closer to the king. Heather told me that she will let Kratos know that we drop by. We should have a meeting with him soon. I am unsure how to manage a liaison with His Majesty. Perhaps we should go see Cornelius, Alex suggested. After all, he is the gatekeeper to the king. I agreed. If anyone could arrange a meeting with the king, it was Cornelius. The tall chump was so avid to serve his sovereign in any capacity that he would obtain us an audience. We found Cornelius in the easiest and most likely of all places, the throne room. He was gazing out at the trees and brush when we arrived, flanked by 2 burly guards. He had not been there prior, but seemed to have stumbled in after I descended the hill. He was of remote expression when we arrived, almost as if he were predicting the end of days and that fate was rather horrific. His pale face showed no emotion. Lady Alexandra, he bent gently, like a twisted twig. What might I do for you? I should like to have a private audience with the king, Alex answered, placing her hands at center. I stood back a bit, for it was my place. Could that be arranged? Whatever for? Cornelius asked, rather astounded. Did you speak with the Lord Chancellor? We have been in talks, yes, Alex said, smiling briefly. We were hoping you could be a better service than the Lord. I am merely the king's attendant, Cornelius answered, as astute as ever. He had his hands behind his back and stood proud like a refined butler. I do not oversee his schedule. I only brief him of events and other important items on his schedule. How unfortunate, Alex feigned sorrow. I would have entrusted you with such tasks. You're very important, aren't you? I could see something change in the attendant's face. I will see what I can do, little miss. That's all I ask, Alex smiled. The following day we had our meeting. The cosmos seemed to answer our call, and Thomas set up a private audience. The king offered to meet us at Cloverleaf Bridge for a rather informal meeting. Alex made sure she wore a nice summery dress. It was pure red and speckled with black polka dots. She had her hair tied back into a single braid-like cable embedded with red flower pins. I wore a simple dress, light blue in color and made of linen. When we arrived, the king was staring out across the blue waters below. One boy, holding a plastic pike, stood watchful at the mouth of the bridge, blocking our access. Another boy was at the other end. He was holding a halberd. The knights were wearing spiked helmets atop their heads. It was common for spiky heads to guard the king. I noticed a few young boy courtiers hanging out near the halberd guard. They were watching His Majesty intently. Such suck-ups. The king appeared to be in contemplation, watching the still waters. Cornelius was standing next to him, a forbidding, tall figure. "Allow them through," Cornelius called, noticing us. The guard stood aside, and we crossed the wooden bridge to meet the king in the middle. The courtiers were clambering like paparazzi, eager to see what His Majesty was doing. Thomas looked much the same as before. His eyes were aquatic blue, and his hair was shaggy and unkempt. As we walked over, I noticed on the other side of the bridge a congregation of about 5 children. They meant to cross, but as soon as they saw the king, they turned on their heels in shock and went the other direction. Turning back to Thomas, I studied him. One could hardly call him a king. He did not look the part. He was wearing simple khaki shorts and a shirt with an abstract design. "Your Majesty," I bowed before him. "You are familiar with Lady Alex, correct?" "Yes," Thomas turned around with a smile. "The girl with elven blood, so I have heard. I am sorry for what my ancestors did to your people." Alex blinked dubiously, unsure of what to say. "What a kind gesture," I inserted quickly. "My lady appreciates that." "A pleasure to be formally introduced at last." Alex smiled awkwardly and curtsied gently. All was going well so far. "What might I do for you?" Thomas inquired. "You had asked for a meeting with me." "I did," Alex said, half embarrassed. "The subject is rather tense and sensitive, I might add. I was hoping we could become more acquainted so that we might form an alliance of marriage." The king did not immediately reply. Cornelius had a ghastly look on his face, one of immense shock. It was almost as if, in this very second, he regretted scheduling this meeting with gusto. Thomas smirked sideways. I was surprised at how quickly Alex spilled her plan. I had to give her credit for being so upfront. "Hardly anyone has propositioned me for marriage," Thomas said, turning back to look at the waters. "All the girls want my brother, the people's prince. Why would you want me? Just because I am the king?" "I share your ideals," Alex said smoothly. We had gone over what to say the night before. Thomas was such a pacifist. It was so easy to pander to his weak principles. "I am not like the other aristocrats that crowd your palace, my liege. I am different. I come from the forest. I am of elven blood. The Lost Forest denizens are not like these royal city snobs." "You do have a point," Thomas observed. "I have studied the ways of the Lost Forest, and I am familiar with how easy-going your lifestyle is. You have been like a sparrow in a flock of parrots. I have been working hard to change things, but the children here seem to be happy with the current status quo. I find it frustrating. A sparrow in a flock of parrots. I fought my hardest to keep an outrageous laughing smirk off my face. I felt like I was holding back the gushing water when a dam has broken. "I believe it is the aristocrats that are happy with no change," Alex said with a small smile. "The actual citizens have different ideas, yet their voices are small despite how many there are." "You are quite learned and poignant, my lady." Thomas was smiling again. "I should like to continue this bonding and relationship building. Shall we meet again?" Lady Alex nodded with the happiest grin on her face. "Splendid," Thomas was elated. "I should like to see you again very soon." We moved out of the way so the king could depart, stepping past the spiky head and joining the rush of courtiers that was clambering around him. We watched him silently. Our plan was now moving into Phase 2. That concludes Chapter 4, Life at Court. I hope you have all been enjoying the podcast so far. It's been nice to be back in the booth. See you next week for Chapter 5, The Trees Say Goodbye. Have a great week! Music for the podcast is Space Journey by Hartzman. You can find all the Chronicles of Everglade novels exclusively on Amazon, and check out my latest novel, The Train to Dranmore, which is also on Amazon. Find us on Instagram and Facebook as well, at The Everglade Chronicles. Thanks for reading, and thank you for your support. See you next time!